Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So, if you got a chance to see my last video, you would know that one of the cards that are going to be featured in this collection came in. So, I'm going to get right into it, but I'm going to give you a quick rundown. We're going to go through my Mickey Mantle collection. So, specifically, we're focusing in on regular edition base card mantles during his playing days. So, that goes from 1952 to 1969. Now, I know he actually has cards going back to 51, but there's two major missing pieces to this, and I'll go through that at the end. One other thing that I'll give you is I'll give you a little story as I go along with the cards that relates to one of the major grading companies, because I had an experience that kind of soured me on them, even though as I go through, you'll notice I have more cards from them than anybody else. But I do have cards from the three major ones, Beckett, PSA, as well as an SGC card. So I'll get through those. I'm going to do those in reverse order. So I'm going to start with the most recent to the oldest, and I'm going to do Bowman first, followed by Topps. So really quick to get started, I'm going to start off with 1955 Bowman. So that's the last that's the last Bowman card in the last Bowman series. So that's the mantle from that one. And you can see that's in a BVG holder, and I'll talk about more of that in a minute. So that's a pretty clean card, reasonable example. Now, this is going to relate to the story, but I'll tell more about it later. You can see that it says authentic altered, but if you read that, it actually says 1959 Topps mantle. Let's see if I can get the focus to cooperate a little bit on this here. All right, you have to forgive me for cutting there, but anyway, I wanted you to be able to read this. So 1959 Topps mantle, card number 10. Obviously, this isn't the case, but I'll explain more as I get through the rest of the cards. So let me go through these for now. So the next card in the collection is 1954 Bowman. So this one's already in a PSA holder, and this was my most recent pickup. So this actually is a nice condition, is actually a nice example. So this is a poor condition example, but you can see that, like, that's a pretty clean picture. Obviously, it's got creases on it, you know, the corners around it, like, it all makes sense. But it's got a clean, readable back. It's pretty solid. And actually, this card, let me get rid of that. And actually, this card is an upgrade over my previous example. So I want to give you this as an example of the variance. When you say poor condition, it can mean this, or it can mean this. So this is actually the first Mickey Mantle card I ever bought. So you can see this one looks a little bit more worse for wear than this one. This one is literally taped together to hold it into one piece. The corner's gone, and creases abound. The image is damaged. This would qualify as a poor condition card. Well, so does this one. And I'll show you the back as well, so you can see that it's taped all the way through just to keep it intact. You can actually read this. Like, I got this back in the late 90s, mid 90s, I think, actually. I've had this for more than 20 years. I'm going to keep it for sentimental value because I don't think anyone else would appreciate it, but I bought this back in the mid-90s for $35 US. It's probably worth it, to be honest with you. If I was able to get it graded, I don't know if any of the companies would do it, but if I did get it graded, I could probably get more than $35, but this one's staying in the collection. But this is going to be the one that's going to be in with the other cards as kind of more of a display piece. But you can see the difference. Both of those are poor condition cards. This one has a little bit more eye appeal. Anyway, moving on to the next card. One other thing I'll say to you as I go through these, you may notice, most of my mantles are in pretty rough shape, because the truth is I favor the philosophy that I'd rather have a hole in the card than a hole in a binder, and that will come into play with some of these. But anyway, this is the 53 Bowman Color Mickey Mantle. So this one's a poor condition one from Beckett. Everything here is labeled correctly, so that's fine. The image on this is actually pretty okay. It's got a little damage up here and some other issues. But you can see the big issue here is the paper loss on the back and the writing. So this would be a candidate where probably I would want to upgrade it, just because I'd like to have the back be a little cleaner. I don't mind creases and some dents in the corners and stuff, but I really want I want the card to show well, and I also want to be able to read everything unhindered by paper loss like this. So I'm going to stop the camera because it looks like the battery's about to run dead, but I'll come back and continue from where I left off. Back after recharging the battery, and it's quite a bit later, so I'm going to try to zip through this a little bit quicker. So next card here is 1952 Bowman Mickey Mantle. So I do have a 1952 mantle. Now you can see from this one here, it's obviously in poor condition. It's in a PSA holder. Still got pretty good eye appeal though. I still really like this card. This one I reached a little bit to pay a little more for it. It's got a little stain in the back. It's got some creases, but it's a poor condition card, which is kind of goes back to what I was saying a little earlier, that the spectrum of what is considered a poor condition card goes. But this is definitely one of the highlights that I picked up. I really wanted to add one of these to my collection. So now I'm going to go into the Topps ones. So notably absent is the 1951 Bowman. Obviously, being the rookie card, it's a lot more expensive than even the 52 that I just showed you. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but let me go into the Topps ones now. So we're going to start with the 1969 Topps. So this is one of my ungraded ones. So again, it's, you know, not exactly super high condition. What I like about some of these later 60s ones, though, is that you do get the full stat line of Mickey Mantle. So this one is, you can see how off-center it is on the back there. So more than likely, I'm probably going to get this graded and probably will move it on to someone else, and I may get a slight upgrade. I don't really need it to be that much nicer, but I'd like it to have a little bit better centering at the very least. As long as the picture is nice and clean, I'm happy. The other thing here is you can see it references Mickey Mantle's retirement, and that he's third on the all-time home run list. So next up is 1968 Topps. So that one's got Mantle. That's card number 280. That's got Mantle in kind of a classic pose. You know, they're getting ready to swing. Design-wise, I like the 68 a little bit. I like when they've got like a pattern. It's really struggling to focus on that one. Let me see here. There we go. It's a little better. And you can see again, full stat line. This one references that Mickey Mantle does hold the World Series mark for 18 home runs, which was the World Series record at that time. I suspect that, I don't remember if it's been passed or not, but the truth is, with the amount of games, all the playoff home run marks will keep dropping, but I don't know if the World Series one will drop, because you still have to get to the World Series enough times to break a mark like that. So now 1967 Topps, and this is one of those ones that I was talking about where the label got swapped. So you can see it's clearly a 67 Topps Mantle, so card number 150, but if you look at the label there at the top, you can see it's 1963. So I'll reference this again once I get to the later cards, but you'll kind of see that there is a pattern to the label swaps. So the next couple are both PSA cards that I bought already in the holder. So this is the 1966 Topps Mickey Mantle. So that's a 3.5 VG+. It's actually a pretty clean card. I really like it. It's probably the nicest one condition-wise in my collection. Not design-wise. The design's kind of simple, but I do like it. The centering on this is actually pretty decent, and the picture's nice and crisp. And the back is nice and legible. Some of the other cards don't have that. This smudge here is actually on the card, but it's just a little smudge there in this portion. But otherwise, pretty clean card. Okay. Next one, 1965. So this is a 1.5, so fair condition card. Centering isn't quite as good, but again, kind of an iconic design, and the back is kind of fun. But you can see this one here also. So at this point, almost all the cards, usually they're right up there referencing, you know, the World Series record. So this one here talks about him hitting 3 home runs in the 64 World Series. So this would have been the very year before to get to that all-time record of 18. So there's a couple of cards that reference that record, and it's kind of fun to see how it changes. So that's 1964 Topps. And this one is correctly labeled. So you can see the BVG holder is showing the correct label there. Decent design. This is probably my least favorite back, though. That kind of orangey color isn't really very good. And the other thing you can see here is, in contrast to the card I just showed you a second ago, he has hit 15 World Series homers, so breaking a mark set by Babe Ruth. So you can see that a lot of the write-ups are telling you about different records that they're breaking year by year, which is kind of fun if you can follow the progression. So now to the 1963 Topps. This one's a little bit more banged up. Still a clean card overall. You can make out. Corners are rounded there at the bottom, and again, this is one of those ones. So the 67 Topps here, the label, this label belongs to the 67 Topps that I showed you, and the other label for the 63 Topps belongs to this one. Now, at the very least, I can see how, if you're going to make a mistake, at least they're both Mantle cards, but I do have a label swap that I'll show you a little later here that is a little bit more inexcusable. But you can see they really struggled getting the right card with the right label, so I don't know what happened on Beckett's end, but anyway. Going to the 62 Topps. This one I bought already in the holder. So the 62 Topps, card number 200. It's a good Mickey Mantle, so 2. It's got the big crease down the middle, but the card is clean, and I do like the wood borders on these. And again, the back on these is actually pretty good. This is one of my favorite ones. So it's a nice and clean. It's only got the one line of stats with the lifetime stats underneath, but it is still a pretty clean card design. This one was also already bought in the holder, so this is the 1961 Topps. So this is still when the Mantle and the Yankees were kind of still at the tail end of their prime. So they were still getting the World Series pretty much consistently, as opposed to those later cards where at that point the Yankees aren't quite as good and Mantle is starting to decline. But at this point you can see in 1960 he still hit 40 home runs, so he's still pretty good. And he's still got a reasonably high average. It starts to drop off and the power numbers start to go down as you go further along in his career. But at this point he's still got a few years left, being somewhat close to what he was. Nowhere near his prime, though. All right, 1960 Topps. This is probably one of my favorite designs because you've got the contrast of the color photograph with a kind of an action shot. You can see you got a line there. It's a fair condition card. This is labeled correctly, so 1.5. And I think the biggest reason for it is that this isn't paper loss, but it looks like it was mounted in a folder at some point. So this was probably stuck on, and obviously there's no real reason to try to take it off. At some point I may upgrade this one just to get one where it doesn't have the mounting paper on the back, but otherwise the front of this card is actually pretty satisfactory. I'm pretty happy with it for the collection for now. So this one is another one where the label got swapped. You can see this is a 1959 Topps Mantle. Really heavy on the creases. This would be a candidate for upgrade. And you can see they're writing on the back. But this really does look like a representation of what a 1950s card would have looked like, that a kid pulled out of a pack and just threw around. This looks like a card that it was used, as opposed to one that got thrown and kept somewhere in pristine condition for a lifetime. There is a lot of character to it, but at the same time, you would like to have one. It's really the clean, as long as the image is clean, that's kind of what I'm shooting for. Now the label on this one says 55 Bowman, and that goes along with the 55 Bowman that I started off the showcase with. Again, the labels were swapped between the two because they all came in the same order. So this one is the 1958 Topps. That is the correct label for it, so there's a 58 Topps Mantle. Pretty good shot. This is still in the earlier portion of Mickey's career. And again, I like the back and the little cartoons in the back. So it talks about his name, most valuable player in 56 and 57. In the 52 series, he hit 345. So pretty fun. Once we get into the 50s cards, they're kind of fun to look at, especially to see how the player's career progressed as he went along. This next one is the last ungraded card I have. So this is the 1957 Topps. This one is one that, again, much like the other one, I will probably look at getting graded. I'd like to get one where you don't have the damage up here. As long as I can get one that's decently centered, again, paper loss on the back. So this would probably be like either a poor or an authentic, but as long as I can get it in a holder, probably move it on to another home. I can get a replacement that'll be a little bit higher. I'm shooting probably for about a 2, maybe a 3 in this, and that would be enough for me. I'm not really looking to have super high condition examples. I enjoy kind of having the hole filled in the binder, so to speak. So this is one of my favorites. One of my close ones at the top is the 56 Topps Mantle. Just between the cartoon here and then the shot of the player. So real basic design, but this is still when Topps was making the bigger card sizes. So you can see the difference. So you've got the 57 was the first year that they shrunk it down, but you can definitely see it's a lot bigger card. 56 and before all the way back to 52, you can see they're using this larger card format, which is really nice to show off the great images on the back and the cartoons and everything. So you can see the biggest thing with this mantle is that it's literally got a hole in it. So, and it's got all these little, I don't know, kind of, they look almost like acid marks, but I don't really think that's what it is, but they definitely look like it. So you can get this one either with a gray back or a white back. This is the gray back variation. And again, you can see that the label, so this is what I was talking about where this is the more inexcusable one. Look at that, 1955 Topps Sandy Koufax. The player's name is on it. So again, as part of that same order, 1956 Topps Mickey Mantle, meet 1955 Topps Sandy Koufax. So they're both poor condition, and everything seems to match up as far as the card in question. But it's kind of embarrassing that you have a service where where someone didn't have the quality control to be able to see that that is not a Mickey Mantle card and that is not a Sandy Koufax. So that's kind of that's part of what's turned me off to getting more of these Beckett ones. In addition to the fact that while I don't mind the holder, I actually really like it. It is kind of nice to have the streamlined holder. Like you can see the difference there in the thickness between the two. These are much easier to stack up. So I'm leaning more towards replacing a bunch of these with ones in PSA holders. But just the same, one of my favorite cards, and this was the first vintage set from the 50s that I ever completed, the 56 Topps. And I'd like to slowly upgrade a few of these. I'd love to get another one with. It's got to have good eye appeal, not dissimilar to this, but I'd love to get one where I don't have a hole over his hat. All right, that brings me to the last of the Topps mantles that I have, 1953 Topps Mickey Mantle. So this one is in an SGC holder. I'd like to have it in a PSA holder, but this one here, like at the very least with SGC, you've got the black borders, which actually look kind of nice. If I can get it into a PSA holder, I don't mind, but it's not a priority. I really do love this card though. The art on it is fantastic, and it's got a pretty clean front. You can read everything and make it out on the back. This is actually a pretty nice one. So this again is a poor condition example. But again, you can have a poor condition example with decent eye appeal. Obviously it's got creases and everything, and it's not a mint card. But I don't mind having a card like this. This fit into the budget quite nicely. So I'm going to put this up here to give kind of the final thoughts. So really, the thing that came down to it for me is in building the collection is I was looking for the most part, especially later on, some of the cards that are a little bit more messed up was more towards the beginning. But I was looking for cards that met a certain aesthetic. I was looking for cards that had good eye appeal, that I enjoyed having, that were fun to add to the collection. I'm going to add, there we go, I'll put that one in there. So the bottom line for me really came down to wanting to put together a collection, having as much of the complete run as possible. Obviously, 2 glaring omissions. No 1951 1951 Bowman Mantle. I don't have the rookie, which is a little bit high on the price point. It's doable. It's something that I'm aiming for, that I'd love to add, but it's not a super high priority given that you could probably buy, especially in Canada, for the price point that we're talking about, you could buy a brand new Rolex, and it's hard for me to justify that. It's still something I'm looking at and something that I aspire to add, but I'm content with the cards that I do have and upgrading the ones that I can here and there. The other one that's obviously missing is the predecessor to this one, the 1952 Topps, so the iconic Mickey Mantle card that everyone kind of knows. That one I don't think is in the cards. I think even best case scenario, a pretty much destroyed version now runs, as of the time of this video, you can pretty much go with it at about 10,000 Canadian. That's kind of the price point I've seen, 10, 12,000, 13,000. To get one that looks half decent, you're looking at 15, 20,000. That's not practical. Basically, it's the price of a car. So probably won't get added to the collection. But I will say that as I do get a chance to upgrade some of these, if I get to a certain point where a bunch of these get upgraded and swapped out, I'll have a follow-up video to that. But anyway, that's enough on this. Hopefully the video didn't go on too long. I did want to give each one of the cards justice because it is one of my favorite collections of one of the iconic players of baseball, especially in the 50s and 60s. So let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.